sorry that many of you will have to have some translation. It's my fault, not yours. Okay, first a little bit of a couple of clarification why I'm here. So in 2009, I was asked by STI, the SAM group, to look at the issues of expansion of their terminal in San Antonio. But you cannot look at San Antonio alone by itself, because Valparaiso and San Antonio, I define it as a one port, and I saw here some messages that perhaps they should have maybe a single port authority or some kind of a single management or landlord arrangement. But practically, since both of them are serving the same hinterland, I would consider them as two terminals. So when I was asked to assess San Antonio, I said that we have to assess the entire situation, San Antonio and Valparaiso together. And I came with a plan which was different than the existing plan, which we called the alternative plan. And it involved another port area, which is the outer port in San Antonio as a long term, not immediate, but the long term, probably site of Region 5. Now, my recommendations were not accepted, and the Port Authority in San Antonio went for a second concession, which was completed, I hope, successfully. But part of the recommendation was also expansion of the terminal here, the South Terminal, by TPS. And I was invited for this conference by the Chamber of Commerce, but supported by TPS, although the original plan was done by their competitor. So I might say that I could be a servant of two masters, or perhaps more than that, I'm an independent consultant. So it's my opinion. I'm basically expressing my professional opinion. Not favorable to some and not favorable to ultramar. Now, what is the agenda that I have here? Very quick, because I believe that most of the stuff was said and I was quoted here before. I will talk briefly about the traffic forecast and especially the issue of fleet, because big ships are changing the entire world, not only Chile, everywhere. And I can say, because I was in a study team of Panama Canal expansion, we didn't consider these big ships. And as you all know, the Panama Canal now is unable to transit the largest ships. The largest ships of the future will be twice the new Panamex. Later on, I will talk about the supply option, and then I do a little bit of comparison and maybe a little bit of summary and conclusion. So let's talk about traffic, perhaps, the first thing in the forecast. Now, as you see, if you look at it, perhaps, you have a little bit of instability here in your traffic, past traffic, and probably in the future. What you see at the beginning, that there was containerization of mainly break bulk cargo, and it was accelerated. You containerize the reefer, the fruits, the copper, the forest. Later on, the second trend was that you started to grow your standard of living, and exactly like the US, you started to get a lot of traffic from Asia. So what we had here is some kind of a short term and long term. You know, the long term was 14.5%, the short term was 9.5%. You know, it's a big difference. How do you do forecast for the future? Now, I tried, as I believe Arturo was talking about it, to come with two scenarios, as you see it here. One of them growing at 6%, which was some kind of a modest, the other one is 15%. Again, we are talking about 2009, and then as you see in green, Reality was a little bit above us, but not far away, because there was recently some kind of accelerated demand and rise in traffic, but future-wise, nobody knows. So up to the year 2017, because it was done in 2007, and I looked only at 10 years, there is a big difference between 2.2 million to 4.4 million, which is 177% difference, which is not uncommon in future forecasting for ports. Now, worldwide, as you see it here, the same instability or the volatility is also in the world. There was a recession, but what you see here, you see two indices. Again, they're taking from another source, IHS Global, it's some kind of international forecasting company. But what you see is somewhere in the 4, 5, 6, this is a range that ports worldwide are growing. Europe is growing at the 3%, the US maybe at the 4%, South America, Latin America, 5, 6, 7, Africa probably a little bit more, but this is a range. Ships. So this is a big variable, and what I put here is some kind of a list of typical ships starting from the sub-Panamax, and then to two generations of post-Panamax, okay, as you see it, first and second, and probably the yellow region is what you have now. I would say the trend of the ships that are coming here now to Chile are somewhere in this region of the 8,000. The vessel here, okay, the Sovereign Maersk, the S-class of Maersk is some kind of a model with a 347-meter LOA, which means that the berth should be at least 30 meters longer. You need at least 15 meters between two ships. So here we are in a different ball game, because perhaps the berth size of the future might be the 360, 380, and as you will see later on, most modern ports now are talking about the 400-meter berth. And the future is here. And the reason, as you see it here, is not, the larger ships are not better in terms of economy because of their size, but they have different engines and they are fuel more efficient. If you look now at voyage cost, the fuel, just the fuel alone, the bunker cost is somewhere in the 60 to 70%. So if you look at a nice video from Maersk, the triple E is about 30% cheaper than the vessel you see here, the Sovereign Maersk. So the fuel is pushing the growth on one hand. On the other hand, what you see here, you see concentration of several shipping lines here. You see the three larger shipping lines. Maersk still number one, MSC and CMA number 2 and 3 are now responsible for 38% of the world fleet. World fleet total is about 15 million TEU. And if you look at the light blue, it will be even more. And perhaps there are many rumors, many years, that the two European, MSC and CMA, will get together eventually, probably because of financial stress. Then we'll have probably some kind of maybe two big companies. And I don't know if you heard the term super alliances, because of Maersk forcing the others to compete with them, they had to get together. All the Asians are getting together. So there are three issues here underlying the big ships. The first one is a traditional one. Larger is more economical. The second one is the fuel efficiency. Very recent and will probably continue. The third one is institutional. Shipping lines have to compete, they get together, they have enough cargo to fill larger ships to go to consolidation. So the name, again, I'm saying, larger ships are coming. They're not coming here directly, but there is what we call a cascade effect, which means if Maersk, again Maersk, is going to ship construction of 20 18,000 TEU ships, it means that they will take 20, maybe 10,000 TEU ships and will push it to another trade. Ships are like real estate. They never die, practically. Okay, we used to say that ships live 20 or 25 years. Technically, they live forever. So what they do, they dump these ships on secondary trades. So you get all the big ships here, not because you trade, you know, when we did the study, the largest ships that are coming here were in the 3,500, 4,000 TEU. Now, ships are coming in 6, 7, and 8. Your trade did not go by a factor of 2. You did not increase the trade. But because of some other things that are unrelated to your trade, you get these big ships and you have to cope with them. It's unavoidable. That's the way of the future. Consolidation. Your ports have to be larger because you have to handle larger ships. It's not because your trade is growing and whatever, and the European and the American are eating more food. It's because the same trade is served by larger ships, which is good for your country because freight is lower, you can export more, maybe import more as well. Let's go to the other subject, the supply. So we talked a little bit, a few words about demand. Now, what about the supply? So we have two plans, one of them by the two port authorities, and the other one that I developed independently. Now, in order to compare or to relate to the plans correctly, we have to look at several issues. First, capacity. You have a traffic forecast. I predicted in 2007 that perhaps the upper bound will be 4 million in 2017 in 10 years. I don't know, again, nobody knows because, as I said before, there's so much instability. So you have to have some kind of a capacity in different stages that you can accelerate or decelerate, depends on what's happening in the world. For example, in the US now, we have a trend, what we call near sourcing. Instead of bringing everything from China far away and perhaps burning a lot of fuel and affecting the CO2 or whatever, there is a trend to bring back manufacturing to the US. Manufacturing now tend to be automated, so you don't need cheap labor. So many things can affect trade. There's a lot of volatility, and all the econometric models that I have seen have failed, unfortunately. It's very difficult to foresee long-term future. But you have to have the capacity. The second one is capability. It's not enough that you can handle the TEUs, but you have to handle, as you see here, the future ships, especially the depths, the lengths, turning basin. It's a big deal here. And of course, the yard area. Big ships brings a lot of cargo, and you have to somehow store the cargo behind the ship. You cannot work a big ship with the yard 12 kilometers away. You have to first put it in the yard, unavoidable, at least with current technology. Efficiency, of course, you want the terminals to be efficient, and there is a special stuff there that I will a little bit highlight on it, automation. Terminals are becoming automated. And then the issue of competition. I know that you are very, very serious about competition, as well as I. This was the purpose of the port privatization and so on. So we have to keep the issue of competition at the top. And there's an environmental concern that I'm not going to address. So what were the plans? First, the plan of the two port authorities. The short-term plan was to extend the two existing terminals, TPS and STI, each one of them by about 100-something meters, and then go to a new terminal, one of them in San Antonio, another one here. The one in San Antonio was done, basically, Puerto Central. I understood it will be ready within 4 years or so. The one here is still under discussion. It's probably the highlight of this conference, I assume. Okay, what was the alternative plan that I suggested? is not to go to new terminals in the existing harbors, and let me put in parentheses, new small terminals, additional terminals, okay? But instead increasing the existing terminal, which means existing STI by about 400 meters, not by 100 meters, to a total length, and you will see it, of about 1,200 meters, to increase TPS here, again by a factor of about 500 meters in order to get TPS equal facility to STI, again to retain competition. That was the idea. And then go to another phase, the outer harbor, which means realizing that the industry is changing. I suggested that instead of again going to small concession here, small concessions, that the same money should be devoted to a new port project of the future. Now, I did a little bit of cost comparison. Again, it's a number 207, so I don't know if it's very relevant. And I dealt only with containers. Now, competition, maybe we should not talk about it. Competition was high, you know, in 2007. It's perhaps even higher now. I understood that Europe probably is the only port in the world where prices are dropping, maybe because of competition. Europe probably is the cheapest port on earth. Yeah, I understood that the $120 per box that they put here is probably the higher figure. And now you are below 100. For comparison, you know, if you go across to Brazil, Santos, it's about 250. Okay, so you are doing well, and there's a lot of movement of lines between. So I thought that competition here is very high. The two terminals were working very efficiently, especially TPS here with such a small piece of land, doing miracles with lineal. So I said, competition, perhaps we should not worry. Again, it's my position. I've seen many port environments in the world, and yours is very highly competitive. Now, we start to talk about the terminal of the future. Automation is coming in a big way, and why? It's not because people would like to save on labor, but the issue of land is very important. If you are going to reclaim land at a 20 or 30 meter of water, and you need a breakwater, so every square meter is probably worth a lot of money. I can tell you a short story about Singapore. Once I was a guest, and I was sitting in the office, and there was a new, in my judgment, office building, which they were demolishing. And I asked, why you demolish the office building? The guy said, to add land to the port. So land, waterfront land, which has access to deep water, protected water, access to land access, to a major highway, to a rail, so expensive that it's worthwhile invest a lot of money in automation. But automation has a price, which means if you read it there, the modules are, this by the way taken from Algeciras. The water depth there is also 30 meters, by the way. And every piece of land, every square meter is very, very expensive. But as you see it here, it's about 600 by 600. And I think that Andreas was also pointing the magic number 600. The width, first you need square areas, and the width desired 600 if you have rail in the back. If you don't have rail in the back, perhaps between 400 and 500 meters. Now, none of your port, the existing port, and none of the proposed ports, Terminal 2 here, Puerto Central there, you know, has even something close to it. You know, the typical width of the port here is 100 meters or so, 150 meters. So why build more 150 wide meter ports, you know, when the entire world is moving, shifting toward automation. Automation needs square areas. That was the logic. Now, just one example. Okay, as you see it here, from the US, a neighbor on the north, okay, we have here, you know, on the left side, my left, you see the existing terminal in Long Beach, the largest one, was divided, as you see it there, Now, there is no more land in the US as well. Very, very difficult to create land in the US. I don't remember any breakwater that was built in the US maybe in the last 30 or so years. So what they did, they filled the gap there, okay? They reduced the number, the meters of the front in order to consolidate, to create one terminal, okay? As you see, it was a small mistake. But the previous terminals, there were 3 terminals there, were able to produce 1.3 million TEU. The new one will be able to produce 3 times the thing, 3.3 million TEUs. Why? Because it will be automated marginal depth. Now, we talked about this issue of scale economy. And here is a very known example from UNCTAD, from queuing theory. But if you see it here, if you move from a terminal with 2 berths to 3 berths, basically you get 1/3 of a berth. Because the utilization that a 3 berths terminal could have at the same level of service is much higher, you see? In a 2 terminals, you can reach berth utilization of 575, 57% per berth. If you go to a 3 berth terminal, you can go to 67, another 10%. So the scale economy is also because of the factor of queuing. Ships are coming, and there's always uncertainty, randomity in their arrival. So bigger terminals have another advantage, which is the berth is better utilized. And berth here, a meter of berth here, I think the last numbers that I've heard are somewhere in the $200,000 per meter. And you're talking about berth that might be 15 or 16 meters, so utilization is very important. Maybe one word before that. Bigger terminals also have another advantage, which is a terminal has always fixed facility. There is a gate, and basically the same gate can serve a big terminal or a small terminal. You have administrative building, you have a shop, maintenance shop. So the scale economy is so dominating that, again, I'm talking against the small terminals. Simply building a small terminals nowadays, you are losing a lot of efficiency. Let's start with San Antonio because this is where I started. Okay? So this is San Antonio. I believe that most of them know. And as you see, there is a lagoon there. I believe the lagoon is here. Okay, this is STI. This is a new diagonal area here that was planned as Puerto Central. But San Antonio also has facility here for grain, for bulk, and in the Espigón they also handle project cargo, handle cars. This was the original plan when I first been there of the SPA expansion. They wanted to take advantage of the lagoon and create something narrow and long, which again, in my judgment, was very old and inappropriate for a couple of reasons. There is no turning basin, you have to take the vessel backward, I don't know how. It's very narrow and you will have probably what we call sitting waves. But years ago, you know, that was how ports were planned. This is what their expansion plan was, to extend 131 meters, okay, the berth of STI, to add some kind of reclamation, okay? And what they wanted to build, again, I was before that, is to create a new terminal here, odd shape, very, very, very strange shapes. Remember the automated terminal? Remember the 600 meter or 400 meters? So nowadays, in San Antonio, you are building terminal which is, I will call it non-standard perhaps. Now, more than that, they are going to cut all this area. The water situation to begin here is not very, very good. It's okay, but still there's downtime because it's somewhat exposed. If you take this one out, it will affect here the water situation. More than that, this new guy will be exposed to the water situation. Now, look at this odd shaped area. Some kind here. How will you work against the ship? You will bring containers here or there? They should be very, very innovative. I thought that perhaps this is not the way to go. I obviously failed. Now, just to add one number, the area here is 14 hectares, roughly. Now, if you have here 945 meters, supposedly free berth or so of 300 meters, the rule of thumb, there's no rule here, that a modern berth required somewhere in 10, 12, 15 hectares. It's fine, but to go now and to build a new terminal, to invest 200, $300 million, and to end up with, I don't know, 4 or 5 hectares per berth, I thought in 2007 that it probably was not smart. Nevertheless, they went through it, the bid was successful, you have a very good operator, I hope that they will do well. Now, if we come close to home, very similar suggestion was here to increase here by 120 meters to reach 740 meters, which is basically a two-berth terminal. Now, I don't know if you still remember the two charts that I showed you, that the two-berth terminal is a little bit inefficient. The berth utilization available is very low. You basically lose 10% of your most expensive resource, the berth. That was a plan, okay? Now, the main issue was and remained lack of deck area, okay? Still, we are talking about 6.5 hectares per berth, and they work in, you know, there's a very nice system. I've seen it today, going to the Ziad, probably the only port that I have known in the world that working with some kind of yard or the gate, which is 12 kilometers away. It is working, very efficient, but it's obviously not the future. Now, this was your plan, original plan, okay, and you had 3 terminals, one of them is here. What you see here, again, in my judgment, very, very small and very expensive terminals with no land access, okay? Terminal of the past, I will call it, very narrow, two berths, all of them. This is the previous bid for Terminal 2, as you see it here. 2 alternatives. One of them is probably a no-no because of this angle here. You cannot work containers this way efficiently. The other one is perhaps better. Each one of them involved only 20 hectares, or again, if you look at it, 3 berths, 20 hectares, about 6 or 7 hectares per berth. Again, if it was there before, if you had finger pier and you filled them, that's fine. But to start a new terminal nowadays, a small terminal in front of the city without land access, I thought it's not smart. Yeah, there's another issue, you are aware of it, that this is probably futuristic, cannot be done because of the water depths in the front. So obviously you have to go to smaller terminals. Now, there was no protection here, or very limited protection. The Port Authority did a study. I'm talking about 2008. They claim that the downtime will be 5%. The people that we consulted say that it might be 15%. And 15% or even 10% is probably a no-no for liner shipping nowadays with big ships. And of course, the area is again the 6 or 7 hectares per berth. To do remote gate, again, like TPS. I thought that it probably, again, was not an ideal situation. Now, in the new building, the area got smaller because of the 40 meters here, but the same situation remained. You have still the issue again, okay, that in this arrangement you have basically only one berth. This is not for containers. So you build a new terminal with one berth, I don't know, you know. Okay, and then in the second one it makes more sense. They published that it's 23.9 hectares, and some of the hectares are not here. If you look at it, it's much less. Okay, but again, it's a two-berth terminal. Okay. So let's come back to what I proposed in 2007. So let me again do a little bit of summary. What I showed you now was supposedly development plan of the two port authorities. Each one of them wanted an additional terminal in the same harbor. STI was successful, you know, San Antonio got the terminal. Here, you are going for a bidding process. Now, my suggestion, again, the alternative plan suggested by me was, by the way, by me and a colleague, Paul Woodbury, port engineer, was instead of going here 130 meters, to go all the way 430 meters and to reach 1,200 meters of marginal berth. And if you will see and look around at port in the world, and I'll show you some, the 1,200, 1,100 is some kind of a magical number. Most of the terminals that are built now are 1,200, 1,100, because each one of them would like to have, again, magic number, 3. Okay, post-Panamax ships. And the post-Panamax, the berth is reaching 400. 400 times 3, 1,200. And to get extension area, to get almost 50 hectares. So I thought that if you do it, and I thought it should be very easy to do, because the port was existing, there was a concession, there was an operator. All that they had to do is just to start dig and build, and within 2 or 3 years, you had a very nice sized terminal in San Antonio. Also, the water depths, minus 15, and so on. The capacity, I estimated that this type of terminal will get to capacity of 2.2 million TEUs, probably more. Just to give you an idea, today the two terminals together handle less than 2 million. So here you have a lot of capacity at a very low price, because you add, all that you do, you have the gate, you have the crane can move all the 1,200 meters. You have a port operator, you have competitive situation. So because you have some kind of a law of competition or a tribunal or whatever, for the sake of your countries, you know, the law should serve the people, not other way around. And your best interest, in my judgment, was to extend this terminal. Now, to keep balanced, I suggested to extend this terminal as well, to add 560 meters, okay, to get almost 1,200. You can increase it a little bit, to go to the same 1,200. So, because the land here is somewhat smaller, I thought that if you increase here, you can get maybe 187. There was some kind of a model that we used, but again, probably they can do more here because of the ZL. So if you extended the two ports, the two terminals, TPS and STI, in each of the harbor, you could have gotten about 2+ million TEUs, which means double the existing traffic. Now, obviously, it was not received well. People thought that I was bought by STI. I remember there was a conference, or by somebody else, as if I have interest in STI or in TPS, I don't know. But this was not the case. Now, a little bit about ports, okay? Just to give you an idea. Many ports are in the same situation. What I'm giving you here is a case study of a recent terminal in Moín, Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a much smaller country than you. Now, they had the same situation. The port was here. Very shallow channel. Here is some kind of a small mountain, very narrow. They did not have any gantry can here. They have in Limon, very old gantry, probably one of the oldest. We'll go straight to the museum now. So the government went out for a bid, and APM was a winner, to build an outer port. Okay? What you see here is totally new port. Concessionaire, APM, the subsidiary of Maersk Line, got concession for water, only water, no public infrastructure. They were supposed to put together here the breakwater, a new terminal, and a new channel, and a little bit of a road. The cost was, here are the details. Here is the terminal rendering. As you see it here, phase one was 600 meters, 40 hectares. The depth, by the way, is 16 meters, and my recommendation here would be, if it's not too late, to go also to 16 meters. 15 is not enough, and if you build a little bit more. The final stage, as you see, it's 1,500 meters, 80 hectares. Just to give you an idea, the first phase is 40 hectares. You're talking about 20 hectares here, or perhaps less, okay? And the capacity is 6 million TEU. Now, timing. When I talked to Outer Harbor, everybody said it's futuristic, it will take 20 years. Well, Costa Rica is, believe me, poorer than you. Still, as you see it here, it was awarded in 2010. Supposedly it will be ready, according to the contract signed by APMT, okay? Will be in 6 years working. The total concession must be longer. Okay, your model is good for existing port and small improvement. If you want to go to new port, somebody has to commit a lot of money, needs longer time to recuperate, okay? Now, another two features, you are very sensitive regarding competition, but sometimes you have to weigh competition vis-a-vis efficiency. And that's what the government of Costa Rica. I happen to be involved in negotiation on the side of the government. And what happened that they agreed to give the operator exclusivity. This is the only port that is allowed handling containers, which means Costa Rica put 80% of their trade, okay, in the hands of one operator because they realize that the efficiency is much more important. And of course, they put a very, very tight price control, very similar to yours. Let's take other examples. Colombo, South Hamburg. This is the existing port. Again, there's no land, the city is around here. They are going to build now a whole outer port, new outer port, very similar in dimension. Again, the same story. The module is 400 meters, each terminal is 400 meters, the 1,200 meters. Okay, total capacity is 7.2 million TEUs and so on. Perhaps one thing interesting here is that, I don't know if you're aware of it, Sri Lanka or Colombo is almost a pure transshipment port, what we say in the industry. 75% there is transshipment. Usually transshipment is a cheap cargo. Still, they saw it as a national interest for the country, and they decided to spend all this $1.6 billion for a new port. Now European. Rotterdam, the largest port in Europe. This is an existing port, went out. Instead of, they have a long river here, that they can take some pieces of land and maybe do terminal tours. What you do here is there. They decided the future is not there. They decided to go out. The numbers are very, very large. As you see, it's an open sea reclamation, 240 million cubic. You know what's the meaning of it? It's huge. 11 kilometers of breakwater, seawall, 1,000 hectares, but this is Rotterdam. Now, Also interesting to see here that there are 3 terminals here, all of them with a 1,200 meters. The same module, again, is coming even in Rotterdam. Now, this is exactly what I suggested to do here. Again, instead of developing second terminals in each harbor, to go immediately to expand the existing and to go immediately out. Now, Mother Nature was very favorable to you. You have a nice river here. I don't know if it's nice, but sometimes it has a lot of stream and it brings a lot of sedimentation. So all this area is very shallow. It's the only shallow area close to the shoreline that you have. So what I suggested to do like every port, which means to build a new breakwater and to put 2 modules here, okay, of 400 by 500 or whatever, okay, to do a turning basin inside here of 600 meters for the 400 meter vessels, okay, and this is what you see here is one, again, what I suggested to start with this one as first, module. You can do it probably within 5 years. And if you remember, I said at the beginning that forecasting is very difficult. So you don't have to develop it, but perhaps you have to build the breakwater. And as you grow, you add modules. If you see it here, the number is huge, 240 hectares. I think that my calculation was 250 even. So it's not only the port that you can have here. You have a lot of logistics. You can do rail. You can locate other cargoes. Okay, you can locate here all the break bulk and general cargo and autos where we don't have space to them. But this is the final, and you can handle maybe 6 million TEUs, probably can, I don't know, last for next 30, 40, 50 years. This is the future. I'm done. Yeah. Let me go to the end. No, one slide. So we made some calculation, comparison, and as you expected, we figured out that going to the outer harbor will be cheaper by about 20%. Also, you have to go to a new breakwater. But because you don't do 2 new terminals, but expand the existing one, the overall result will be cheaper than the existing. One word about conclusion, okay? You heard it before. The existing plan is talking about smaller, odd-shaped terminals, no rail, no support facilities, problem in navigation, water situation, and so on. Alternative plan, I suggest you have a new spacious harbor for the future. Again, it's not for the now. And there will be saving and also handling of other cargoes. And this is the end. Thank you very much.